Hello and welcome back to One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show. We are pleased to be joined with a special guest, Jason Gay of the Wall Street Journal. He is the sports columnist at the Journal, and really happy to have you with us, Jason. How are you today?
All right.
So, the news of really the day, the news of the last 24 hours in at least New York sports is the New York Mets, who strike a big deal. They get Francisco Lindor, also Carlos Carrasco from the Cleveland Indians. For a pair of prospects, a couple young players, a couple young shortstops. So I want to start there on your immediate reaction to a really big deal in New York sports, the new Steve Cohen-led Mets, sort of shaking things up and striking a big deal, and just your reaction immediately.
It's like Darth Vader looking out the window of the Death Star and seeing a bigger Death Star. I think that's what it's like. I think that the Yankees have been the presumptive heavy in not just New York, but in all of baseball for such a long time, the team that ultimately would outspend anybody. And to now look out the window and see, a crossover in Citi Field, a club that is eager, willing, aggressive, and will put more money down maybe than the Yankees will, is a incredible seismic shift in the power balance of baseball in the city, but also baseball overall.
Yeah, you mentioned that the Yankees are a little quiet this offseason, which is a little strange because they're normally the aggressor. Do you think that they have something big coming soon? Do you think they're going to make a big splash?
It's hard to say. I think that we have to look at it from the perspective of, for the legacy teams, they're coming off of a season that was wildly disruptive, right? As a aggressively shortened, lower revenue, nobody in the seats event that significantly altered their projections for the year. And so I think any new or a legacy team is sitting around saying like, okay, well, how do we sort of go forward here? We don't know what 2021 is going to look like either. Whereas the Mets are just kind of like fresh on the scene and willing to spend, and they're like the new guy in town, right? And it's a different dynamic over at Citi Field for sure. So I would say that the Yankees, if they're being timid right here, they're not terribly different than most other clubs in the sport. What's different is that you have this team like the Mets that doesn't have to actually spend too much time worrying about what happened last year, because it's all about the now and what happens from now.
Jason, I want to get into football and the NFL, but before that, you write a lot about the intersection of sports and sort of what's also happening in the world. And I think the sports world is reacting to what happened on Wednesday at the United States Capitol, where there was an attack by a mob of Donald Trump's supporters. You saw reaction in the NBA, which has sort of become the more vocal or the most vocal of the professional leagues, and they've taken on that role throughout the summer during the Black Lives Matter protests, and now they're speaking out again, and Doc Rivers being one example. I'm curious of your perspective. There's a long sports history of athletes and just sports in general of having a voice in these issues. Your perspective on seeing the NBA step up, what you might expect from other leagues. Is this something that we should expect going forward to be sort of a part of sports culture?
Well, you said it better than I could. I mean, there is, as you said, this very rich and long tradition of activism within sports. And anybody who thinks this is some sort of thing that started percolating in the last 18 months is out of their mind. It goes generations long. And there are many, many examples where sports and professional sports in particular have been a catalyst for social change. And many, many athletes who are now revered as legends and icons of American life were themselves in their lifetimes quite pilloried, quite controversial, incarcerated sometimes, because they were unwilling to go with whatever the status quo was. So there are long, deep roots here. I think what's unique in this particular moment is just, we're in an utterly different social media environment, right, where things are just much more immediate and sides are taken rather quickly and things get rather heated and aggressive very quickly. The NBA, I think, is structured such that it works effectively as a partnership between the athletes and the ownership structure of the league. It's pretty obvious. You take out a dozen or so individuals from the NBA, it's not the NBA anymore. So the people who are the superstars recognize that leverage, and we're I think blessed to have a generation of athletes now who are socially active, leading with somebody like LeBron James. I mean, how singular it is to have inarguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, one of the most recognizable athletes in the world, willing to put skin in the game, willing to be at the front of these conversations and not shy away from them, which is a compulsion we've seen in the past, right? We've seen athletes who just, this wasn't what they wanted to do. So I think that, obviously the NBA is a little forward leading here. But with regard to what happened the other day and how that relates to sports, I think, listen, I think everybody is feeling some element of, mortification and lack of surprise, maybe, and, are waiting to see what the fallout is from it. But I think that this was some sort of shock event. I think this was something that was, not terribly surprising to people who have been following the tenor of the rhetoric and the divisiveness for quite a long time. And like anybody, I was, appalled by what I saw on Wednesday.
No, yeah. It was definitely a horrifying event, and it was very sad to witness a day like that in our history, for sure. I'm going to kind of turn the tides a little bit. I'm going to sort of move over into the NFL. We're coming into the first weekend here of playoffs. So you've written a lot about this recently, and so I kind of want to get your thoughts on who is your Super Bowl pick? Who do you kind of see going all the way this year?
All right. Well, it's probably, fair to get it on the record. I'm going to give you a utterly boring, pick, which is that it's awfully hard to think that Patrick Mahomes, when all is said and done, is going to be beatable in a playoff format. They're defending Super Bowl champions. They have shown an ability not just to win, but to win from behind. And they did that last year, and they've done it a few times this year. They've looked at times a little lethargic as a team in the latter half of the season, but this is a club that is wildly experienced, wildly talented, well coached. If anybody is going to knock them off, I would suspect it's Buffalo, which is a team that's playing with a great deal of energy, great offense right now. There's this local enthusiasm, the fact that they're able to play a game in Buffalo and they're going to have a small handful of fans there, I think is going to be a nice push on the back for them. And then the NFC, I feel it's quite a bit more volatile, but the Packers, it's hard to sort of say, okay, well, they have this home field advantage in 2021, because what is home field advantage right now, right? There aren't going to be butts in the seats at Lambeau Field, I don't think. So is it a meteorological thing? Like, they're going to be better if it's freezing cold and snow? Maybe. We've seen that already in the season. So I would say that, the Packers, of course, as a top seed and having that home field will have some sort of advantage, but I can see any collection of teams, whether it's the Saints, Seahawks, having a shot at this. And what a weird and wild story we'd have if it was Tampa and Tom Brady. I mean, they've got a long road, right? They got to do it on the road this opening weekend against Washington. But were they to get there, you've probably talked about this before, but no one's ever played a Super Bowl in their home stadium. How weird would that be? That's actually never happened in the 50 some odd years of having this game. No one's ever actually been the home team host team. And so that would be pretty special.
And how it would raise the legendary status of an already legendary quarterback to go do it in another uniform. Another team, the Cleveland Browns, that's in the playoffs, I think draws a parallel to maybe myself being a hopeful New York Jets fan that wants to see the ship get turned around, and a Browns team that was bad for so long, finally good. The Jets are in the place that the Browns were. We used to say that, at least there's the Browns, when we to find a worse example of an NFL team. But the Jets are that team now. They are what the Browns have been for a long time. When it comes to turning around, I think everybody agrees it starts with a head coach. I'm curious if you have somebody in mind for that job for the Jets that you think could potentially right the ship here.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
You'll do it.
Yeah, I'm willing to do it. I'll take even less than what I'd take, like $6 million to do it. That'll get me in there. You know, it just feels like one of those like Bermuda Triangle jobs, right? That,
Yeah.
you know, people enter it with the best of intentions and sometimes really stellar resumes, and just there are so many forces and mysterious things that exist in the atmosphere that make it just, you know, a hazardous place to be. You know, I think that there is vogue in the NFL now towards the young brain type. I mean, you're seeing guys like Joe Brady, who was a quarterback coach at LSU, like an offensive assistant last year at this time, now getting looks as a head coach after just 1 year in Carolina. There, of course, are, you know, McVay proteges and Brian Daboll, who's a very experienced guy up in Buffalo. I think a lot of them will get looks. Eric Bieniemy is somebody who has done great work in Kansas City. You know, I think there are a number of really good candidates. I think in a weird way, it's the Jets that have to make the sale, right? They have to make the sale as this is the place you want to be. You know, they have this, they have some foundational talent. They have a very, very high draft pick, the number 2 draft pick. So they have some very attractive things, and New York's not the worst place to be. We all know this, right? We're all New Yorkers. But it is kind of an odd environment where there's a lot of baggage that comes with that franchise. And so if you're talking about an attractive candidate who has the pick of any kind of job they want, if they could go off to coach San Diego or Los Angeles Chargers rather, or Jacksonville, how do the Jets possibly make their case over those teams? So I think that's going to be the interesting dynamic here. The Jets actually have to go out and sell themselves.
Yeah, and then kind of piggybacking off of that, the Jets, as you mentioned, have the number 2 draft pick. There's a lot of different ways that they could go with this. They could take Justin Fields. There's a lot of surrounding conversation about what's going to happen. So I kind of want to get your thoughts.
I'm not, as of yet, I haven't been hired as an advisor to the Jets, but I would suspect that they might be motivated to make an aggressive move, a quarterbacking position. We've seen already that kind of thing rewarded. We had the crazy thing just a couple of years ago where, you know, the Arizona Cardinals had drafted Josh Rosen, I believe, top 5 pick for that club, and dispatched with him after just 1 season in favor of Kyler Murray. Worked out. Great move. Good idea. If they feel as confident in somebody like Justin Fields to step in there and be an impact player from the jump, then maybe it is time to cut ties with somebody like Sam Darnold, who, you know, came in again as a very, very well-regarded player, and you know, I think is quite well liked, but you know, might not have the consistency and promise that he once had. You know, this league is ruthless, and we see it each and every week, and so I think there is less of a inclination to wait around and worry about the feelings of the future if there's something presumably better around the corner. How's that for a bunch of aphorisms?
That's good. That's perfect. And we appreciate the time. Jason Gay of the Wall Street Journal doing us a service, coming on and giving us some wisdom on New York sports in general. Thanks so much for joining us, Jason.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah, please.
How are you holding up? You know, how are you doing through all this?
Good. I mean, we've moved completely virtually, you know, obviously here we are on Zoom, but we've found a way, we've adjusted. It's given us a chance to go digital, which we needed to do as it was. So, you know, we're rolling with the punches.
Okay. Well, stay at it, stay with it, remain confident, enthusiastic. I encourage you, you know, like, don't let anybody try to talk you out of doing what you want to do. It is, you know, a wonderful world out there, and there's always room for great, awesome talent. And so thank you so much for having me on the program.
Thank you. Thank you for those words.